What would you do if something so precious to you was taken without your knowledge, and the people you trusted most betrayed you? That question echoes in my mind as I stand in front of my jewelry box, the place where I've kept my most cherished possessions for years. My heart races. My hands, usually steady, are shaking as I look at the empty space where the one thing I could always count on was supposed to be. The $590,000 ring, my grandmother's ring, is gone. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. It was always there, tucked away in its velvet box, safe and sound, a reminder of my family's legacy of love and trust. How could it be gone? How could they let this happen? I take a deep breath and try to calm myself, but panic rises in my chest like a tidal wave. I immediately reach for my phone, trying to make sense of what's happening. I text my sister, Grace. Where is it? Where's the ring? No response. I text my mother. Mom, what happened to the ring? It's missing. The seconds stretch into what feels like hours. Still nothing. I run down the stairs, heart pounding, my legs weak from the rush of adrenaline. I burst into the kitchen where my mother is sitting, sipping her coffee, looking entirely too calm for this moment. Mom, the ring, it's gone. I've looked everywhere. Did you take it? I try to keep my voice steady, but it cracks with frustration. I can feel the tension building in my throat, tightening with every word. She looks at me blankly. What ring, honey? The one your grandmother gave you. I nod, my hands trembling. Yes, that ring. The $590,000 one. It's not in my room. It's not anywhere in the house. Did you sell it? My mother pauses, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she's carefully weighing her response. Why would I sell your ring? You know how important it is to you. Then where is it? I demand, my voice growing louder, more desperate. She doesn't answer right away, which only sends a wave of dread crashing through me. What is she hiding? I don't know, sweetie. Maybe you misplaced it, she says with a casual shrug, as if the disappearance of something so valuable was no big deal. I want to scream. Misplaced it? You know that's not possible. I've kept it in the same place for years. You or Grace must have taken it. I'm sure it'll turn up, my mother says, sipping her coffee as though she's speaking to a child who's lost a favorite toy, not a woman who's just discovered that a priceless family heirloom is missing. But deep down, I know the truth. Something doesn't add up. The way she's acting, too calm, too nonchalant, it's not right. I rush upstairs, searching through every drawer, every nook and cranny, feeling a sickening sense of panic rise within me. I've always been so careful with it. How could I have let this happen? But then, a sickening thought hits me. What if someone took it? What if they sold it? The idea is ludicrous, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. My family has always had a complicated relationship with money. It wasn't the first time something valuable had gone missing or been misplaced in the house. But a $590,000 ring? That was a whole new level of betrayal. I can't sit here waiting any longer. I text Grace again. Grace, where the hell is the ring? Finally, she responds. I don't know. I didn't take it. That's all she says. I'm left standing there, staring at my phone, my thoughts racing. Could it really have been stolen? Could someone I trusted with my life have done this to me? The idea seems too far-fetched, yet everything in my gut tells me that's exactly what happened. I suddenly feel like I'm drowning, suffocated by the weight of everything I've just discovered. I need answers. I need to know the truth. The phone call comes about an hour later. It's my cousin, Emma. Her voice is frantic, like she's been holding something back for far too long. You won't believe what I found out, she says breathlessly. You know that ring? The one your grandmother left you? It's been sold. My world stops. What? My voice cracks. What do you mean, sold? I don't know all the details, but I overheard a conversation between your mom and Grace. They sold it, Emma continues. They sold your ring without telling you. It was never supposed to be touched, but they went ahead and did it anyway. I feel the blood drain from my face. It's as if the room around me begins to spin. My hands tremble as I grip the phone, trying to process what Emma just told me. I had suspected it, but hearing it out loud makes it feel like the ground has been ripped from under me. How could they do this? How could they betray me like this? Tears burn in my eyes, but I force them back. I'm not going to let them see me cry. Not after everything they've taken from me. How much did they get for it? I ask, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know. But it doesn't matter, Emma replies. They lied to you. They lied to all of us. This isn't just about the money. It's about the trust they broke. And she's right. It's never been just about the money. It's about the betrayal, the deceit. It's about how my family, the people I thought would always have my back, just sold me out for a few $1,000s. I hang up the phone and stand there, alone in my room. The silence is suffocating. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted them so completely? The pain in my chest grows, but something inside me shifts. I'm done being the person who lets this slide. I'm done being the person who sits back and lets people walk all over me. I don't know what comes next, but one thing's for sure. I'm going to make them pay for what they've done. I won't rest until I get the answers I deserve. As I walk toward the door, a cold resolve fills me. I don't know how or when, but I know this. I'll never let them get away with this. I've been betrayed, and now it's time for me to take control. The bridge has been burned, and there's no turning back. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? I sit on the edge of my bed, still reeling from the discovery. My heart is racing, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts I can barely keep up with. The ring, the symbol of my family's history, my grandmother's legacy, my most treasured possession, was gone. And the people I trusted most? They were the ones who had sold it. But how did I end up here, standing on the precipice of something I couldn't undo? Let me rewind a bit and tell you about who I am and why this betrayal cuts so deep. I grew up in a picture-perfect suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and you could always count on a warm meal at any neighbor's house. My father worked as a successful attorney, my mother stayed home and ran the household, and my sister, Grace, and I were the golden children, at least. That's what it looked like from the outside. We had everything. Or so I thought. My mother, Maria, was the embodiment of poise and grace. Always dressed to the nines, her smile never faltered, and she had a way of making everything look effortless. But beneath that perfect facade, things weren't always so polished. There were whispers about her spending habits, her interest in material possessions, and the way she seemed to prioritize appearances over the people who truly mattered. I learned early on to keep my head down, to do what was expected of me. Be perfect. Don't rock the boat. Grace, my younger sister, was always the free spirit. Where I followed the rules, she broke them. Where I stuck to the path laid out for me, Grace wandered. She was impulsive, unpredictable, and always testing the boundaries, traits that both fascinated and terrified me. Growing up, I was often caught in the middle between the demands of my family and my own sense of what was right. It was easier to be the good daughter, the one who could be counted on to keep the peace, to make sure everything looked okay on the surface. But behind closed doors, things weren't as flawless as they appeared. My father, though loving, was distant. His work took precedence over family dinners, over our milestones, over everything else. It was clear that the only thing that mattered to him was his career. We were just accessories to his success. And my mother, despite her best efforts to create the illusion of a happy home, had a tendency to focus more on appearances than on genuine connection. She was always chasing the next thing, whether it was the latest designer bag or the newest luxury car, always seeking validation from others. I loved them both, but I often felt like an outsider in my own family. I spent years yearning for something deeper, something real. But the only thing I ever got was a lesson in the importance of reputation and material wealth. I learned that love wasn't always unconditional, it had strings attached. It wasn't until much later that I understood just how much my family had influenced who I became. When my grandmother, Eleanor, passed away, everything changed. She was the only person in our family who had ever truly understood me. I spent every summer with her, learning about life, love, and the kind of wisdom that can only come with age. She was kind, fierce, and sharp-witted, a woman who had lived through decades of change and never once compromised on what she believed in. Grandma Eleanor had a special place in her heart for me, and when she passed, she left me her most prized possession, a stunning diamond ring. It was worth a small fortune, but to me, it was priceless. It was more than just a ring, it was a piece of her, a constant reminder of the love and guidance she had given me. When I first received it, my mother didn't hide her disappointment. "Why not Grace?" she asked, her voice laced with bitterness. But Grandma had always said that I was the more grounded one, the one who could carry on her legacy with grace and dignity. And so the ring was mine. For years, I kept it safe. I wore it on special occasions, but mostly, I kept it locked away, like a treasure hidden from the world. My grandmother's ring wasn't just about wealth, it was a symbol of the love she had poured into me. It was her way of telling me that I was capable of greatness, that I mattered. But as the years passed, the relationship between my mother and me grew strained. I wasn't interested in the life she envisioned for me, a life defined by material success and the approval of others. I wanted something more meaningful, something deeper. I moved away for college, cutting the distance between us, but even then, my mother never truly understood me. I wanted to do something good with my life, to make a real impact on the world. She, on the other hand, pushed me into internships and high-profile events, always talking about status and wealth. I met David during my junior year of college. He was different from anyone I had ever met, charming, funny, and full of ideas about changing the world. We connected immediately, and soon after, we became inseparable. David understood my struggles, my desire for something real. But as much as he tried to be supportive, he, too, couldn't fully understand the complexities of my family dynamics. My relationship with David wasn't perfect, but it was a breath of fresh air. He saw through the facade I had spent years building. He encouraged me to go after my dreams, to not let the weight of family expectations drag me down. When I finished school and got my first job in the nonprofit sector, I thought things would finally start to fall into place. I was doing what I loved, helping others, and feeling fulfilled. But then, the call came. My mother needed help with something urgent, something about the ring. I never thought much about the ring being a point of contention. To me, it was a piece of my history, something that connected me to my grandmother. But to my family, it was always something else, a valuable asset. A means to an end. I wish I had seen it sooner. I wish I had known that the people I trusted most, my family, were willing to sacrifice everything for the right price. That's when the realization hit me, cold and clear. They had sold my $590,000 ring, the very symbol of my grandmother's love, and they hadn't even bothered to tell me. As I sit here now, in the aftermath of the discovery, I'm left with a sense of betrayal that I can't quite put into words. My family, the people I had always thought I could rely on, had just proven that their love came with strings attached. Strings that could be cut whenever it suited them. But that's not what hurts the most. What hurts is the realization that I had never truly been a priority. Not to my mother. Not to Grace. And certainly not to the family that I had spent my whole life trying to please. And now there's no going back. The bridges have been burned. But I'll be damned if I let this slide. The ring was gone, and the weight of that loss was suffocating. But what hit me harder than anything was the realization that my family, my own flesh and blood, had taken something so precious without a second thought. It was more than just a material possession. It was a piece of me, a piece of my grandmother's love, and they had sold it as if it were nothing more than a commodity. I could feel the anger building inside me, rising like a storm on the horizon. It was as if my whole life had been a lie. I had spent years trying to meet their expectations, trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, the perfect granddaughter. I had spent my time looking for love and approval from people who didn't even know what real love was. And now I was faced with the brutal truth. They weren't the people I thought they were. I had to know how this happened. I had to get the truth, no matter the cost. I couldn't let them get away with this betrayal. But first, I needed to confront them, each one of them. I started with my sister, Grace. Grace and I had always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, she was the one who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. Grace was the wild one, the free spirit who didn't care about rules or consequences. She was the one who always seemed to get away with things, while I was the one who had to follow the path laid out for me. Despite our differences, Grace and I shared a bond. We had grown up together, after all. We shared memories, secrets, and experiences that no one else could understand. But lately, that bond had been fraying. She had moved out a year ago, and I hadn't seen much of her since then. But now I needed answers. I texted her. "Grace, we need to talk." Now, a few minutes later, she called. "What's going on?" Her voice was calm, almost too calm, as if she hadn't just betrayed me. "Where's the ring, Grace?" I asked bluntly, cutting to the chase. My voice was trembling with barely contained anger. She sighed, her tone suddenly defensive. "What ring?" "You mean Grandma's ring?" "Yes, that ring. The $590,000 ring that was supposed to be a family heirloom. The one you or Mom must have sold." My words came out in a rush, each one like a punch to the gut. "Look, I didn't sell it. You know I wouldn't do that," she said, her voice rising with frustration. "You know Mom has been acting weird with that ring. I'm not the one you need to be mad at." My stomach churned as I listened to her. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't anyone tell me?" I didn't know about it until recently," Grace admitted, her voice suddenly quiet. "Mom said it was for an emergency. She told me she was doing it to help pay off some debts. I didn't want to get involved. I'm sorry." I couldn't believe it. "Debts? You've got to be kidding me. You just let her sell it without saying a word." "I didn't have a choice," Grace snapped. "She's our mother, Ellie. She does what she wants, and we just have to deal with it." I wanted to scream. My sister was supposed to be on my side. She was supposed to protect me, to back me up. Instead, she was justifying the actions of the woman who had hurt me the most. "This isn't just about the money, Grace. This is about trust. This is about the fact that they took something that meant everything to me and didn't even think to ask if I was okay with it. They sold my grandmother's ring, and you're sitting here acting like it's no big deal." "I know," Grace said, her voice softer now. "I know it's a big deal. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know how to stop her. I didn't know what to do." But her apology felt hollow. It didn't undo the damage. It didn't bring back the ring or fix the fact that my family had torn apart the one thing I'd clung to for years. I hung up the phone without another word. There was nothing left to say. Grace hadn't betrayed me in the way I thought. She hadn't sold the ring, but her complicity, her silence, was just as damaging. Next, it was time to confront my mother. I wasn't sure what I expected. Would she deny it? Would she try to justify her actions? Or would she act as though nothing had happened at all? Whatever it was, I knew I couldn't let her get away with this. I drove over to her house that afternoon, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The confrontation with Grace had only left me more angry, more hurt. The whole situation had become a storm I couldn't escape. When I walked in, my mother was sitting on the couch, watching a cooking show on TV. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Mom," I said, my voice tight with barely contained emotion. "We need to talk." She turned her head slowly, as if she was just waking up from a nap. "Oh, Ellie, what's wrong now? Where's the ring?" I asked, my voice cracking. She blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "The ring, Mom. The $590,000 ring that Grandma left me. You know, the one you sold without telling me." Her eyes flickered for a moment, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. Guilt. What do you mean, sold? She asked, her tone rising with defensive panic. I didn't sell it. I didn't do anything with it. Mom, don't lie to me. I know you sold it. Grace told me everything. For a moment, she was silent. Then, with a sigh, she slumped back into the couch, looking weary. I had no choice, Ellie. You don't understand. Things have been tight around here. Your father's business is in trouble and I didn't know what else to do. I felt my stomach turn. You could have told me. You could have asked me. It wasn't yours to sell. She looked at me with weary eyes. I didn't think it would matter. You've been so busy with your life, Ellie. I thought you'd be fine without it. That was when I saw it. She didn't care. She didn't care about me, about my feelings, about the bond we shared through that ring. To her, it was just another object to be sold when things got tough. I trusted you, Mom, I whispered, the pain making it hard to breathe. I trusted you, and you betrayed me. And with that, I turned and walked out, my heart shattered into pieces. The conflict between me and my family was far from over. But with each conversation, the truth became clearer. My mother wasn't just careless. She was willing to sacrifice anything, even the last meaningful connection to my grandmother, for the sake of financial security. And Grace? She wasn't strong enough to stand up to our mother. She wasn't strong enough to protect me when I needed her the most. I knew now that I couldn't count on anyone but myself. The trust had been shattered, and I was left standing alone, ready to face the consequences of their betrayal. But this wasn't over. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Not without a fight. After the confrontation with my mother, I felt like I had entered a new phase of my life, one that was darker, colder, and more painful than anything I had ever experienced before. My family, the people I had spent my whole life trying to impress, had just shattered everything I had ever believed about them. I was no longer the daughter they could count on. I was no longer the sister who would back them up no matter what. And worse, I realized I had been living in a world of delusion, thinking that the love and loyalty I gave them were somehow being reciprocated. I didn't know where to go from here. I didn't know what to do next. But I did know one thing. I couldn't just let them get away with it. I couldn't let my mother and sister think that everything could go back to normal after selling something so precious, after breaking a trust so deeply rooted in our family's history. I had to take action. I had to find a way to get back what was mine, or at least make sure that they understood the full weight of what they had done. I started researching. For the first time in years, I turned my back on everything I had once valued. I had spent so long trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect granddaughter, the perfect sister. But now I was done with that. If they were going to act like this, I wasn't going to stand by and be the person who forgave without consequence. I was going to be the one who made them understand the true meaning of betrayal. The first step was to track down the ring. It wasn't just about getting it back. It was about confronting whoever had been involved in the sale. My heart burned with anger every time I thought about it. How could they have been so callous, so indifferent to what that ring meant to me? I reached out to a few trusted people who could help me. One of them was Chris, a private investigator I had worked with on a case for the nonprofit organization I worked for. Chris was no stranger to uncovering shady dealings, and I knew he could help me track down where the ring had ended up. After a few phone calls and emails, Chris managed to dig up some leads. The ring had been sold through an auction house, and from there, it had been purchased by an anonymous buyer. That was all I knew. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The thought of it being out of my hands, possibly worn by someone who had no idea of its history, made my skin crawl. I couldn't bear the idea of someone else owning my grandmother's ring. I couldn't let that happen. But as I prepared to make my next move, I began to notice something else. I was changing. The person I had always been, the one who valued peace and family above all, was starting to fade. In its place was someone determined, someone capable of doing whatever it took to fix this. I wasn't just going to get the ring back. I was going to make sure my family understood that they couldn't just sell me out like that. They needed to feel the consequences of their actions. I started making calls. First, I reached out to the auction house where the ring had been sold. I was met with a wall of polite indifference. They couldn't give me any information about the buyer without a subpoena, and even then, they could only release limited details. It wasn't much, but I wasn't about to back down. I was going to fight for what was mine. I was going to fight for my grandmother's memory. Next, I contacted a lawyer. I didn't want to go down this path. I had never been the type to use the law to settle disputes, but this wasn't just a simple family issue. This was a violation, and I wasn't going to let it go unnoticed. My lawyer, a tough woman named Rachel, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "I'll help you track this down," Rachel said. "We'll make sure they understand just how serious this is." With Rachel's help, we began crafting a plan. I wasn't going to let my family get away with this. I was going to expose them for what they had done. And if it meant dragging them through the courts, then so be it. But as I dove deeper into this journey, something else began to shift. I started to see my family through a new lens. I had always admired my mother's strength, her ability to handle any situation with grace and poise. But now I saw her for what she truly was. A woman who would do anything to protect her own interests, even at the cost of her family's well-being. She had always been about appearances, about keeping up with the Joneses, and now I understood just how far she was willing to go to maintain that image. And Grace, my sweet, impulsive sister, wasn't any better. She had watched it all happen. She had known what my mother was doing, and she hadn't said a word. She hadn't even tried to stop it. Grace was just as caught up in the cycle of materialism and self-interest as everyone else. She was willing to let me take the fall so that she wouldn't have to rock the boat. I wasn't sure how I felt about her anymore. I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. But even as I was consumed by anger, a small part of me began to wonder, what had turned them into this? I spent the next few weeks working tirelessly with Chris, Rachel, and a team of experts to track down the ring. It became my obsession. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think of anything else. Every time I thought about what they had done to me, I felt a fire burning inside. It wasn't just about the ring, it was about my family's betrayal, their complete disregard for what I valued. Finally, after weeks of investigation, we got a break. The buyer had been tracked down, and we were able to confirm their identity. I could hardly believe it when I found out who it was, someone from my mother's circle. Someone she had known for years. And that was when the full weight of the betrayal hit me. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about the ring. This was about my family's desperate need to maintain their image, no matter who or what they had to sacrifice in the process. I had spent weeks chasing down every lead, diving deeper into a world I never thought I'd have to enter. The investigation into the sale of my grandmother's ring had become a consuming obsession. But now everything was building up to this moment, the confrontation with the buyer, the final piece of the puzzle, and the truth I had been avoiding. The buyer had been traced to a wealthy couple named Richard and Diana Hale. I couldn't believe it at first. Diana was someone my mother had been close friends with for years. They'd attended charity galas together, taken luxurious vacations, and celebrated milestones side by side. My mother had always spoken about Diana with such admiration, almost reverence. It seemed impossible that she had crossed this line, that she had betrayed me and my grandmother in such a cold, calculated way. And yet, here we were. With Rachel's help, I managed to set up a meeting. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let this betrayal fester any longer. I had to see for myself how far my mother was willing to go for the sake of appearances and wealth. I had to confront the people who thought they could just take what was mine, as if it meant nothing. The meeting was set. Richard and Diana agreed to meet at their sprawling mansion on the outskirts of town. As I drove up to their home, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The estate was massive, gated, with marble fountains and manicured lawns. Everything about it screamed money, power, and privilege. It made me sick to my stomach to think that my family had willingly sold out to someone like this. When I arrived, Richard opened the door. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his face a mask of polite indifference. Diana, on the other hand, was sitting in the living room, her long, perfectly styled hair falling over her shoulder. She looked almost bored, as if meeting me were just another mundane part of her day. "Ellie, how lovely to finally meet you," Diana said, standing and extending her hand. Her smile was cool, controlled. I didn't shake her hand. I couldn't. The air between us felt thick with tension. Every inch of me screamed that this wasn't right. They had stolen something from me, and here they were, acting like nothing was wrong. "Cut the pleasantries," I snapped, my voice sharp and tight with emotion. "I know you bought the ring. I know it was my grandmother's. And I know you've had it for weeks." Diana's smile faltered, just for a second, but she quickly regained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice sugary sweet, but I could hear the underlying edge. "I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding." I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my composure. I wasn't going to let her lie to my face. I had the evidence. I had everything I needed to expose her. "I know about the auction," I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. "I know that ring was sold by my mother. And I know that you bought it." Richard stepped forward, his expression hardening. "You need to leave," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't have any right to accuse us of anything." I stood my ground, my heart pounding in my chest. "I have every right. You took something from me, something that meant everything. That ring was passed down from my grandmother, and you—" I paused, the words stuck in my throat. "You just treated it like it was nothing." Diana's face twisted with annoyance, her eyes flashing with irritation. "It's just a ring, Ellie. It's not worth all of this drama. You're making a scene over something that doesn't even matter." My world tilted on its axis. I felt my chest constrict, my throat tightening with the sharp sting of betrayal. It didn't matter. She had just said it. The thing I had valued more than anything, the symbol of my grandmother's love, her legacy, meant nothing to Diana. It was just a piece of jewelry. A trinket. Tears of rage stung my eyes. I fought them back, refusing to show weakness, refusing to let them see just how much their cold indifference was crushing me. "You're wrong," I said through clenched teeth. "It matters. It matters to me. And I'm not going to let you get away with this." Richard stepped closer, his tone now threatening. "You need to understand something, Ellie. This isn't your business. We didn't steal anything. Your mother made the decision to sell it. It's hers to do with as she pleases." The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. My mother had made the decision. She had made it all too easy for them. She had sacrificed my grandmother's memory for something as hollow as wealth and status. She had given them permission to rip away the last connection I had to her. I felt the ground shift beneath me as the final piece of the puzzle locked into place. For a moment, I stood there, frozen in disbelief. Then the anger came rushing back, stronger than ever before. I had been betrayed by my own family, my own mother, and now these people were standing here acting like they had done nothing wrong. Without thinking, I turned on my heel and stormed out. I couldn't stay there any longer. I couldn't look at them anymore. I was done. The drive back home was a blur. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, my thoughts chaotic. How could she have done this to me? How could she have sold me out like that, like I meant nothing? The pain was sharp, cutting through me with every passing second. My mother had always been my rock. She had always been the one I could turn to when I needed guidance, when I needed strength. And now, she was just another part of the betrayal. She had let me down in the worst way possible. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was a mess. I slammed the door behind me, pacing the floor as the anger boiled over. They had destroyed everything, and in that moment, I realized something that shook me to my core. I would never be the same again. It was at that moment that I made the decision. I would cut ties with everyone. No more family. No more pretending. I was done trying to please them. I was done being the daughter they could manipulate. I was done with all of it. They had crossed a line, and now I was going to burn every bridge. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The moment I stepped away from Richard and Diana's mansion, the weight of it all hit me harder than I could have ever anticipated. For the first time, I realized how completely I had lost myself in trying to hold on to something that was never meant to be. The version of myself that cared about my family's approval, that held on to the idea of love and loyalty, was gone. And in its place, a woman who was ready to sever every tie, burn every bridge, and walk away from it all. I felt free for the first time in years. But freedom isn't without its costs. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions of daily life, work, errands, trying to keep up appearances, but inside, I was a storm. My thoughts spiraled around the same few things: betrayal, anger, and the gnawing feeling that I was losing the only family I had. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I had to make some serious decisions. The most pressing one? Cutting my mother out of my life completely. She had crossed a line, and I couldn't allow myself to be part of the game she was playing. She wasn't just a woman who had sold my grandmother's ring. She was the embodiment of everything I had fought against, everything I had tried to believe in. And as for Grace, my sister, I didn't even know where to begin. The trust one had built with her had been shattered the moment she chose to stay silent, the moment she let my mother's actions slide. She had never once called me, checked in, or even acknowledged that anything had gone wrong. It was as though my pain didn't even matter. I sat in my apartment one night, staring at my phone, the screen glowing back at me like a silent enemy. My fingers hovered over my contacts list. I had already cut off most of the people in my life who had ties to my mother, those who had enabled her, those who had turned a blind eye to her behavior. But my family? My mother? Grace? I wasn't ready. But I also couldn't keep pretending. The decision to send that message to my mother was not one I took lightly. I had no idea how she would respond, or even if she would respond at all. But I had to make it clear that I was done. I was done with the lies, the manipulation, the toxic games. I took a deep breath, my thumb shaking as I typed. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. You betrayed me. You betrayed Grandma's memory. And you've shown me time and time again that I'm not a priority to you. I need space. I need to figure out who I am without you in my life. I can't be part of this anymore. Goodbye. As soon as I hit send, my heart dropped into my stomach. It felt like a weight had been lifted, but at the same time, I was terrified of the repercussions. I didn't know if she would come after me, guilt-trip me into returning, or if she would just leave me to make the choice. Either way, the truth had been said, and there was no going back. The reply came a few hours later, though I wasn't sure what I had expected. Ellie, you're making a huge mistake. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You need to think this through. There it was. No apology. No understanding. Just an attempt to make me feel like the one at fault. I wasn't surprised. It wasn't about me at all, it never had been. It was about what she could get out of the situation. And the fact that she hadn't even acknowledged my pain or what she had done to me spoke volumes. I didn't even reply. I didn't need to. I had said everything that needed to be said. The next step was even harder. Grace. My sister had always been the one I had a special connection with. We'd been through everything together. From childhood arguments to late-night talks about our dreams, we had shared our lives. And now, after everything that had happened, I had no idea where we stood. Would she even care? Would she even understand? I hesitated, my finger hovering over the phone. What would I say? Could I even make her understand that I had been hurt, betrayed, and that she had been complicit in it all? Finally, I wrote, Grace, I don't know what you're thinking, but I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. Mom made her choices. I don't know where you stand, but I need to be clear that I'm done with all of this. I can't keep pretending that nothing happened. I need to do this for myself, even if it means walking away from you too. I sent it. Then I waited. Hours passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside of me was dying. I had cut off my mother, and now I was about to lose my sister too. And then, as if everything had been building to this moment, the reply came. It was short. I don't know what to say, Ellie. I'm sorry, but I can't choose sides. I can't be part of this. My chest tightened. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. She couldn't choose sides. That was it. She was choosing to stay neutral. She was choosing to not take responsibility for her own actions or the part she had played in this family's dysfunction. I wasn't angry anymore. I was crushed. In that moment, I knew that I had lost everything that had ever mattered to me. I spent the next few days in a haze. I didn't leave my apartment. I didn't return calls. I barely ate. My world had been turned upside down, and I was trying to figure out how to navigate this new version of myself. This woman who had cut ties with the only people she had ever known. But somewhere, deep down, I also realized something else. I had freed myself. Cutting my family off had been the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most necessary. I was no longer a victim of their betrayal. I was no longer chained to their toxic expectations. For the first time in years, I had control over my own life. And that, in itself, was worth more than anything they could ever take from me. The days that followed my final messages to my family felt like walking through a dense fog. I couldn't see the path ahead clearly, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to let myself get pulled back into the chaos, the deceit, the endless manipulation. It had taken me years to reach this point of clarity, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me now. The silence from my mother and Grace was deafening. It was as if I had become invisible to them, a ghost drifting through the life they once shared with me. I had no more emotional ties to them. They had severed that connection long before I had the courage to sever it myself. At first, I didn't know what to do. I had never been alone like this. The thought of starting over, of rebuilding from the ground up, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I had to start over, but how? I started by putting myself back together, piece by piece. I spent hours at the gym, releasing the pent-up anger that had been simmering inside me. Every weight I lifted felt like a burden lifted from my shoulders. Every drop of sweat that dripped down my face was a symbol of the pain I was shedding. I could feel my muscles growing stronger, but it wasn't just physical strength I was building. It was emotional, too. My old self, weak, dependent on others for validation, had crumbled. And this new version of me, the one who had found her voice and stood her ground, was emerging. It was as if I had been reborn. I knew that I couldn't go back to the life I had before. The job I had at the marketing firm was comfortable, sure, but it was also a cage. I had spent so much time trying to please my mother, to live up to her expectations, that I had lost sight of my own dreams. Now, I realized I needed something different. Something more. After a week of reflecting, I made a decision. I would quit my job. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I had worked hard to get to where I was, and leaving behind the security and familiarity of a stable job was terrifying. But I couldn't stay there, stagnant and unhappy, while the world outside offered me the chance to find my own way. It was time to start fresh, time to do something that would give me purpose. I dusted off my old art supplies. The ones I had shoved to the back of my closet years ago, after I let my mother's disapproval crush my passion, and started sketching again. At first, the lines were shaky, uncertain. But soon, they began to flow with more confidence, more clarity. The images on the page took shape. It felt like a part of me I had long buried was coming back to life. I hadn't painted in years. When I was younger, art was everything to me. It was my escape, my way of expressing things I couldn't say with words. But then, as I got older, life had pulled me in different directions. College, a corporate job, pleasing my family, all of it had crowded out my creativity. But now I was taking it back. I enrolled in a local art class. It felt liberating to be around people who didn't know me, people who didn't have any expectations of me other than to simply show up and create. Slowly, I started to feel like I was reclaiming the person I had once been. The girl who dreamed of making art her life, who would lose herself for hours in a canvas, who wasn't afraid to be true to herself. With each brushstroke, I felt a little more free. But I knew that finding peace within myself was just the first step. I had to learn how to live without the constant emotional burden my family had placed on me. I had to teach myself how to be okay with being alone, how to thrive in my own company. I spent the next few months rediscovering who I was. I went to new places, met new people, and embraced experiences that didn't fit into the neat little box I had once allowed my life to exist in. I took weekend trips to places I had never visited, explored museums, tried new foods, and started going to yoga classes. For the first time in a long while, I felt alive. And as I began to piece together my life, I also realized that there were lessons I needed to learn from the very things that had once broken me. I had spent so much time blaming my family for everything, my mother for her betrayal, Grace for her inability to choose a side, Richard and Diana for profiting off my loss. But the truth was, I had allowed myself to stay in that toxic cycle for far too long. I had let their actions dictate my happiness. I had been complicit in my own misery. The pain of losing them was still there, but I began to realize that maybe this separation was the best thing that could have happened to me. It was the catalyst I needed to stop relying on others for validation and start believing in myself. It was the push I needed to take control of my own narrative. I was no longer a victim of my circumstances. I was the architect of my own future. And then, out of nowhere, something unexpected happened. Rachel, my best friend, the one person who had always been by my side, came to visit me. She showed up at my door with a suitcase in hand, looking nervous but determined. "I think it's time we talked," she said, her voice soft but firm. I let her in and we sat down, the weight of the years of friendship between us pressing heavily on my chest. We had always been there for each other through everything, and now, as I looked at her, I realized that no matter how much I had cut from my life, there were still people who cared for me, people who saw me for who I truly was, beyond the family drama. "I've been thinking a lot," Rachel continued. "I know this whole situation with your family has been hard, but I need you to know that I'm here for you. You're not alone, Ellie. I want to help you rebuild your life. I want to be part of your journey." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I pulled Rachel into a tight hug. "I think I'm finally learning what it means to be free," I whispered. "And I think I'm finally ready to build a life that's mine." And so, with Rachel by my side, I took the next step in my journey. I no longer had to play by anyone's rules but my own. The power to choose was in my hands, and I was going to use it to build the future I had always dreamed of, one free from manipulation, free from betrayal, and most importantly, free from the shackles of my past. The weeks following Rachel's visit were transformative. The weight that had burdened me for so long, the weight of my family's expectations and betrayals, felt like it was slowly lifting. With Rachel's unwavering support, I found myself rediscovering parts of me I had long abandoned, parts that I was now beginning to nourish. I began to attend my art classes more frequently, diving deep into the creative process. At first, it was challenging. I hadn't picked up a paintbrush in years, and the anxiety of trying to rekindle a passion I had suppressed for so long was overwhelming. But with each stroke on the canvas, something inside me began to shift. The canvas became my safe space, no judgments, no expectations, just me and my emotions pouring out into colors. It wasn't just art that I was rebuilding, it was my identity. The more I painted, the more I realized how much I had let myself be defined by others. For so long, my life had been about meeting other people's expectations, conforming to a mold I didn't even fit into. Now, I was shedding that old skin, allowing myself to be raw and vulnerable, and it felt liberating. But even as I immersed myself in my art, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't just the creativity that needed to be rekindled. It was the life I had put on hold in the pursuit of approval from others. I needed to reconnect with the world outside of myself. So, after much thought, I made another bold decision. I would move. My apartment, though it had served as a sanctuary from the chaos of my family, now felt too small, too limiting. I needed a fresh start. Somewhere new. Somewhere that could provide the space for me to grow, not just emotionally, but physically, mentally, and spiritually. I started looking into apartments in different neighborhoods, places I'd never considered before. A new environment would be my new beginning, the perfect setting for my new chapter. After some searching, I found it, a charming, modern loft in a vibrant, artistic district of the city. The walls were filled with natural light, the kind that would make any artist's heart sing. It was everything I needed and more, a blank canvas for my next step in life. I signed the lease, packed my things, and moved in. The move was a symbol of something larger than just changing addresses. It was about reclaiming control over my future. This was my life now. I was no longer waiting for permission to live it. Living in the new loft felt like stepping into a dream. It was everything I wanted, spacious, filled with light, and surrounded by other creatives who were also building their dreams. I found myself wandering the streets of the neighborhood in the evenings, sipping on coffee from a local cafe and getting lost in the murals and street art that adorned every corner. The energy in this part of the city was contagious. It reminded me that life could be vibrant again. I started networking, attending gallery openings, and connecting with other artists. I even started to show some of my work at local art exhibitions. Slowly, my name began to get recognition in the community, and that was when I realized I was finally living the life I had once dreamed of. The process of building my own identity, reclaiming my passion, and surrounding myself with people who supported my dreams felt surreal. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose, excited to face the day ahead. But even as I embraced this new life, old wounds occasionally resurfaced. I'd catch myself wondering how my mother was doing, what Grace was thinking, or whether they even missed me. These thoughts weren't constant, but they were there, like little reminders that the past would always linger in some way. It was during one of those moments of quiet reflection that I received a message from Grace. "Ellie, I've been thinking a lot. I know things have been tough between us, and I know I've messed up. But I want you to know that I miss you. I miss my sister. I understand if you don't want to talk right now, but I'd love the chance to make things right." I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't the apology I had been hoping for, but it was a start. For a moment, I was overwhelmed with emotions. I wanted to respond, to tell her how much I had hurt, how much I had wished she had stood by me during the hardest time of my life. But I knew I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I couldn't just dive into forgiveness. The wounds were too deep, and I needed time to heal on my own terms. But I also knew something important in that moment. I wasn't going to shut her out completely. For so long, I had relied on my family to define who I was. But now, I realized that my healing wasn't going to come from their apologies or actions. It was going to come from within. The decision to let Grace back into my life, or not, would be mine to make, and I was going to approach it with caution. I decided to respond with something simple but honest. "I don't know what the future holds for us, Grace. But I'm not ready to talk yet. I need time." I hoped that she would understand. I needed space to keep rebuilding myself, to continue discovering who I was outside of the family drama. There was no rush. In the meantime, life continued to unfold in front of me. I immersed myself in my work, the art, the community I was now a part of. I even began to sell some of my paintings, nothing huge, but enough to make me believe that this new path was the right one. I felt like I was finally gaining the traction I had longed for, and with each new piece I created, I felt a sense of pride I hadn't known in years. But perhaps the most important thing I gained from this new chapter was the realization that I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. I had spent so long trying to be someone I wasn't for the sake of my family's approval. Now, I was simply being myself. And, for the first time, that was more than enough. As I sat on the balcony of my new loft one evening, sipping a glass of wine and watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and purple, I knew I had made the right choice. This was my life, my choices, my journey, and it was just beginning. It had been months since I moved into the loft, and I had settled into a rhythm that felt comfortable, yet not quite final. Every day brought new experiences, new people, and new lessons. My work as an artist was taking off slowly but surely, and the quiet peace I had found in my new life was more than enough to keep me going. But, as always, life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected it. One evening, as I was putting the finishing touches on a painting I had been working on for weeks, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from Rachel, maybe a notification from one of the galleries I had submitted my work to. But instead, it was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello," I said, unsure of who it could be. "Ellie?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but there was something in the way they said my name that made my stomach drop. "This is Ellie. Who's this?" It was quiet for a moment, as if the person on the other end was gathering their words. Finally, they spoke again. It's Grace. I know you're probably not ready to talk to me, but I need to say something. I just can't stay silent anymore." My heart raced as the words sank in. Grace. My sister. The same person who had abandoned me when I needed her most. The same person whose betrayal had left me devastated. And now, after all this time, she was reaching out to me. I felt a sudden flood of emotions, anger, confusion, fear, but more than anything, I felt an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. Was I ready for this conversation? Was I ready to face the person who had played such a crucial role in the destruction of everything I had once known? Still, I couldn't hang up. There was something about her voice that suggested this wasn't just another one of her empty apologies. Something in the way she sounded made me pause. "I don't know if I'm ready to talk, Grace," I said carefully, "but I'm listening." She let out a long breath, almost as if she had been holding it for years. "I don't even know where to begin," she said softly. "I know I messed up. I know I've hurt you, and I'll never be able to undo that. But I need you to know something. It was never about you. It was never about the ring or the money or whatever else. I was just lost. I've been lost for a long time, Ellie." Her words hung in the air between us, and I felt the familiar knot in my stomach. It was the same old pattern, the same apology wrapped in excuses, the same explanation that only served to absolve her of responsibility. I stayed silent, letting her continue, not sure if I was even ready to hear what she had to say. "I never told you this, but I was jealous of you. Of your independence, of the way you always knew what you wanted. I wanted to be like you, but I was too afraid to be myself. I thought if I could just keep things normal with Mom, keep the family together, then maybe I could feel whole. But I was lying to myself and to you." The revelation hit me harder than I expected. Jealousy. It was hard to process. I had never thought of Grace as someone capable of jealousy. After all, she was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. She had the perfect life until it all came crashing down. And yet, here she was, admitting something so raw and vulnerable. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued, "but I need you to know that I've been trying to fix myself. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to work through my issues. I don't want to keep hiding behind excuses anymore. I want to make things right between us. I miss you, Ellie." I took a deep breath, letting the words settle in. I wasn't sure how to respond. The woman on the other end of the phone wasn't the sister I had known. She wasn't the person who had turned her back on me when I needed her most. No, this was someone different, someone who was trying, finally, to be honest with herself and with me. But honesty alone didn't make up for years of betrayal. "You hurt me, Grace," I said softly, my voice shaking with emotion I hadn't expected to feel. "You hurt me in ways I can't even put into words. And I don't know if I'm ready to let you back into my life yet." There was a long silence on the other end. I could almost hear her holding her breath, waiting for me to say something more, anything more. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. Maybe one day, but not now. "I get it," Grace said quietly, her voice laced with regret. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I just wanted you to know that I'm not the person I was, and I'm working on being better. That's all I can say for now." We both sat in silence for a moment, and then I spoke again, this time with a finality I hadn't intended. "I need space, Grace. I need to heal. Maybe someday we can talk more. But for now, I need to focus on myself." And with that, the conversation ended. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had wanted this for so long, but now that it was happening, I wasn't sure what to make of it. Grace's words echoed in my mind. She was working on herself. She was trying. But that didn't change the fact that I had been burned by her, by my mother, by all of them. The wounds were still fresh, and I wasn't sure if they ever would heal. But in that moment, I realized something. I was okay. I didn't need to hold on to the past anymore. I didn't need to carry their mistakes with me. I had spent so long trying to prove myself to them, to live up to their expectations, to make them see me. But now I had stopped asking for permission. I was building a life for myself on my terms. Later that evening, as I sat in front of my latest painting, I realized just how far I had come. The journey was still long, but every step I took was a step away from the past. A step toward freedom, toward independence, toward healing. And maybe, just maybe, the future would hold more than I ever expected. The days following my conversation with Grace felt like a blur, half of me still reeling from the words I had heard, the other half strangely numb, as if I had stepped outside myself to observe the world around me. The truth was, I wasn't sure where to go from here. My sister's apology, though heartfelt, hadn't provided the closure I was hoping for. It had merely opened a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. For days, I buried myself in my work, creating piece after piece, each one a little more personal than the last. I painted like I was trying to exorcise the ghosts of my past, each stroke a step toward reclaiming my own sense of purpose. It felt good to channel my emotions into my art, but no matter how many hours I spent in my studio, I still couldn't shake the lingering feeling of something missing. The thing I had long avoided, facing the truth of what had happened with my family, had suddenly become unavoidable. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood to clear my mind. It had become my favorite ritual, just walking aimlessly, breathing in the fresh air, listening to the soft hum of the city, and finding solace in the world around me. The urban landscape had a way of grounding me, reminding me that there was more to life than the walls I had built around myself. As I wandered down the familiar streets, I spotted a coffee shop I had never noticed before. It was small, tucked away between two buildings, with a sign that simply said The Corner Cafe. Its warm, inviting lights contrasted with the cold concrete around it. I walked in without thinking, eager for a break from my own mind. Inside, the cafe was cozy, with mismatched chairs and tables. The scent of freshly ground coffee beans hung in the air, and a soft indie song played in the background. I ordered a latte and sat by the window, letting the world outside blur as I sipped my drink. As I stared out the window, lost in thought, I felt the presence of someone nearby. My gaze drifted to the man sitting across from me, who seemed to be absorbed in a book, but his eyes occasionally lifted to meet mine. He was around my age, maybe a little older, with dark hair and a quiet, almost intense demeanor. There was something about him that seemed familiar, though I couldn't place where I had seen him before. After a few moments, he cleared his throat and smiled, making the first move. "You look like you have a lot on your mind," he said gently, his voice low but inviting. I blinked in surprise, unsure of how to respond. I didn't usually open up to strangers, but something about his warmth, his calm presence, made me want to. Maybe it was the exhaustion from all the emotional weight I had been carrying, or maybe it was the fact that I was surrounded by people who never really saw me for who I was. Either way, I found myself speaking before I could second-guess it. "I've been thinking a lot about my family," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "And how everything fell apart." The man nodded, not in pity, but in understanding, as though he had heard similar stories before. "I know the feeling," he said softly. "It's hard when the people you love don't see you for who you are, or worse, when they betray you. It leaves you wondering if you'll ever be able to trust again." His words hit me like a wave, and before I knew it, I was talking more than I had planned. About my sister. About my mother. About everything that had led me to this point in my life. I didn't even know why I was sharing it with him. He was a stranger, after all. But somehow, in that moment, I felt like I needed to say it. I needed to release the words that had been bottled up inside me for so long. I spent my entire life trying to make them proud, trying to live up to their expectations, I said, my voice trembling. But in the end, I was just invisible. Like nothing I did mattered. And when they sold my ring without telling me, that was it. That was the moment I realized they weren't going to change. The man listened intently, nodding again as he processed my words. He didn't rush to offer advice or comfort. He simply let me speak, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like someone truly understood. "You've been through a lot," he said once I finished. "But you're stronger than you think. It's not easy to walk away from family. But sometimes cutting ties is the only way to protect yourself." I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me at his words. For so long, I had been carrying the weight of my family's actions like a chain around my neck. It was a burden that had defined my every move, my every thought. But in that moment, I realized something that had been slowly dawning on me. I didn't need their approval to live a fulfilling life. His words echoed in my mind long after we parted ways. They were simple, but they were exactly what I needed to hear. I wasn't weak for walking away. I was strong for finally putting myself first. And that, I realized, was the key to my own freedom. The next few days were filled with more introspection. I found myself revisiting the idea of cutting ties with my family completely, something I had been avoiding for so long. Grace's apology had been a small step toward healing, but it hadn't solved the deeper issue, my need for independence from them. I had already taken the first step by moving out of the house, by pursuing my passion for art, by reclaiming my life from their expectations. Now it was time to take the next step, to sever the ties that had been holding me back. It wasn't an easy decision. Letting go of family, even one that had hurt me, felt like betraying a part of myself. But I knew deep down that I couldn't continue to live in the shadow of their mistakes. The decision came suddenly, but it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I made the call to my mother. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. You sold my ring without telling me. You never took my feelings into account, and that's not something I can just forgive. I need space from all of you. For good." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could feel her trying to find the right words, but I didn't give her the chance. "I'm sorry, but I need to take care of myself now. I need to live for me." And with that, I hung up. It wasn't easy, but in that moment, I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. The past was gone. The betrayal, the hurt, the confusion, none of it would define me anymore. I was finally free. The days after my call with my mother were strangely peaceful, as if I had unlocked a door to a place I had long been afraid to enter. For the first time in years, I woke up in the morning feeling lighter, more in control of my life. I had made the hardest decision I had ever had to make. I had cut myself free from the people who had hurt me the most. But with that freedom came the promise of something better, something I had yet to fully understand. It was time to fully embrace my new life. For the first few days, I stayed home, working on my art and reflecting on the decision I had made. I found solace in my studio, where the outside world felt far away, and all that mattered was the paint on my canvas. I lost myself in the colors, the strokes, the textures. Each painting seemed to capture a different aspect of my journey, a different chapter of my life. And with each piece, I felt a bit more whole, as if the art was not just an expression of my emotions, but a healing process too. But as much as I tried to shut out the world, I knew there were things I needed to face. Things I couldn't avoid forever. One morning, as I prepared for another day in my studio, I received an unexpected message. It was from Rachel. My best friend, the one constant in my life who had never wavered, even when everything else had fallen apart. She had always been my sounding board, my safe place. And now, more than ever, I needed her. Ellie, the message began, I know you've been through so much, but I wanted to check in. You've been so focused on your art and your healing that I think you've forgotten something important. I sat back, surprised by the directness of her words. Rachel never beat around the bush. She was blunt, but always out of love. She continued, I think it's time you finally let yourself live. Not just for yourself, but for the future you deserve. You've been holding on to so much pain and anger, and I get it. But you've got so much more waiting for you if you're willing to let go of the past once and for all. Her words hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. It was as though she had read my mind, sensing exactly what I was struggling with. She was right. I had spent so much time trying to protect myself from future pain that I had forgotten how to live in the moment. I had pushed away every opportunity to trust, to open up, to embrace life as it came. I had been so focused on building walls that I had forgotten how to build bridges. I took a deep breath and replied, Maybe you're right. It's time to start living again. Thank you for reminding me. That afternoon, I took a walk in the park near my loft, letting Rachel's words sink in. It was a warm spring day, the sun shining brightly as people strolled by, laughing and enjoying the day. The sound of children playing, the rustling of leaves in the wind, it was all so peaceful, so full of life. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel a little bit of that peace. I stopped at a bench by the lake and sat down, watching the water ripple gently. It was in that moment that I realized something. The past had shaped me, yes, but it didn't have to define me. I didn't have to keep carrying the weight of the past, the baggage of broken relationships, the hurt from betrayal. I could choose to move forward, to embrace the future that was still ahead of me. And in that future, I had the power to decide what role my family would play. Maybe one day, I would be ready to reconnect with them. Or maybe I wouldn't. Either way, it was my choice. And I was the one who got to decide what my life would look like from here on out. The next few weeks were transformative. I poured myself into my art more than ever before. The paintings came quickly, each piece more personal than the last. I began to show my work at local galleries, and to my surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People were drawn to my pieces, to the raw emotion and vulnerability that I had poured into each canvas. It felt like I was finally being seen, not as someone's daughter, not as someone's sister, but as myself. Just Ellie. One evening, as I was leaving a gallery opening, I ran into the man I had met at the cafe a few weeks earlier. His name was Nathan, and we had exchanged brief pleasantries before, but now he was standing in front of me again, as though fate had decided we weren't finished talking. Ellie, he said, his smile warm. I didn't expect to see you here. Your work is incredible. I smiled back, a bit surprised to see him, but also grateful. Thank you. I'm glad you think so. He paused, then asked, Do you ever feel like you're on the edge of something? Like everything you've been through is just leading up to this moment. I laughed softly, surprised by the depth of his question. I do, actually. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand what it means to be free. To be me. Nathan's eyes softened, and he nodded. That's the most important thing, you know. Being yourself. We stood there for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air between us. I had no idea where this conversation would lead, or where Nathan might fit into my life. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what came next. As the months passed, my life began to take shape in ways I hadn't anticipated. I was growing as an artist, but I was also growing as a person. I had started to embrace my independence, to find peace in the chaos that had once consumed me. I was building my future, not just through my work, but through the choices I made every day. I was learning to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. And while I didn't know exactly what the future held, I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer defined by my past. It wasn't an easy road, and there were still moments when the past tried to creep back in. There were days when I missed the family I had once known, and days when I doubted my decisions. But with each step forward, I reminded myself that I was stronger than I had been before. I had learned to stand on my own, to make choices that were right for me, and to live a life that was mine, not dictated by anyone else. And so, as I stood at the edge of this new chapter, I realized that the true power didn't come from what I had left behind. It came from what I was choosing to create. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?